Baba knows the way. For Joseph Baba Ifa, Baba knows the way. We follow the signs. He walks with the Orisha through sacred lines. He speaks with the ancients. He honors the drum. He carries the wisdom where we all come from.
Hey family, thank you for tuning into Our Roots podcast with Joseph Babayi Ifa. Where only the strongest roots see the light, brought to you by 𝗿𝗲𝗍𝗃 Candles and more. If you haven't had the opportunity, hit that subscribe button. Some intro, huh, Phil?
Oh, I love it, man. It's amazing.
Yeah, definitely. It doesn't get old, man.
Yeah, no, very proud of that.
No, that's epic for real. I think that has to be the best. I can only think that Orula had a better Ifa intro.
Right?
You know, wherever he is.
I get it, yeah.
No, but definitely it's such a really nice song, really nice music. And what's up, bro?
Nothing much, man. I'm happy to be here. Happy Sunday for everybody watching. And make sure, you guys leave a comment. If you haven't subscribed, make sure you subscribe.
Sure.
And also, don't forget to join our membership program if you want even more access to Joseph Babayi Ifa. That means extra episodes, lives just for you, early releases, discounts on merch, classes, all that jazz. So just hit that join button right under there. We got 3 separate tiers, and you can choose your path.
For sure, and one of the benefits is definitely our classes that we have going on, whether it's the 4-week introductory curriculum to Ifa Orisha concepts or the Moyuba class. So you get benefits towards further education within Ifa as well. So definitely check all that we have to offer out, family.
Nice. So what are we talking about today?
Today, we are continuing with our Meji series. We're almost done.
Oh.
This is number 14? Yeah. So today we're going to be talking about Babayi Irete Meji, and this is probably one of the more popular ones, one of the ones that people have really been asking. I don't know who the various viewers have been, but they've said, Babayi Irete Meji, please. When is Babayi Irete Meji getting here? Please, Babayi Irete Meji. It's finally here.
Really?
Yeah, so it's a very popular one. It's one that comes out a lot. I've been in various initiations where this 𝗏𝗲𝗿 was revealed. I actually directed an Ifa with my godfather in Miami, where one of the gentlemen actually came with Babayi Irete Meji. And his case was really interesting because he was a doctor. And Babayi Irete Meji is known as the 𝗏𝗏𝗿 that was able to go to the afterlife, I guess? He was able to go to the afterlife and return alive, right? He was one of the few people, if not the one, that was able to kind of go back and forth between worlds, dimensions. This is the 𝗏𝗏𝗿 of astral projection, depending on how you term it. Where people are able to separate their souls or their beings from their bodies and basically travel at will. Definitely not a talent I have, but I've interacted with people who have told me they have it, and they've had some pretty wild revelations and things based on that talent. But I guess we could start there. Babayi Irete Meji was somebody that, kind of did what he wanted. He's an interesting guy because he really didn't play by the rules. He was misunderstood for sure because this 𝗏𝗏𝗿𝗏 speaks a lot about, prepotence or, arrogance, the importance of avoiding those things. But he really wasn't. He was misinterpreted as such, as being vain and things like that. And because of it, death became interested in him and kind of wanted to knock him off because death, was tired of seeing Irete Meji kind of do whatever he wanted to do at his will. So Irete Meji kind of felt the vibe, and he went to go visit a couple awos who performed divination, and his own 𝗏𝗏𝗿𝗏 was revealed, where they told him that death was chasing him, right? He quickly performed sacrifice. There's versions where, the animals that were sacrificed were left in certain key spots that ultimately evaded or allowed him to evade death. But there are versions as well where he came face to face with death, and his first reaction was to laugh.
What?
Yeah, and when that happened, death was so perplexed by the reaction, she got scared and left him alone.
So that's when they say laugh in the face of death.
That was born in Babayi Irete Meji. He is the only person that was able to laugh in death's face and survive. That's why till this day, the Yoruba people have the concept that when it's time to die, the best thing we could do is laugh, if we're able to. Because, it's really the one thing that scares death away is laughter. If we actually look, what does death usually come accompanied by or with? It's sadness, sorrow, tears, mourning. But one of the things that actually keeps it away is happiness and laughter. So Babayi Deji has a very resounding message where the happier we stay, the happier we are, we usually live longer, as long as it's within moderation. But this 𝗀𝗲 speaks of that concept and why it's actually seen as basically immortality to a certain degree. Irete Meji technically didn't die. Death was always looking or trying to fraternize or come around, but every time he would evade her. So it's a really incredible 𝗀𝗲 in that regard. So,
yeah, really, that's awesome.
Yeah. Now, they say that one of the personifications of this 𝗀𝗲 in nature is Babalawo or San Lázaro, right? And all of the legs or children of Irete Meji, better said, have something to do with Babalawo. So, for example, I'm Irete Otura. This is actually my mother 𝗀𝗲, right? Where my 𝗀𝗲 descends from the combination of Irete Meji and Otura Meji, who we just went over last week or whenever this is being released. But it's definitely going to lean more towards the Irete side. And at least in my 𝗀𝗲 is actually where Babalawo planted the pumpkin and followed the vines that grew from it all the way to the land of Dahomey, where he became king. So when we look back, going to Irete Meji, it speaks of all the manifestations of Babalawo throughout all of its children, whether it be in Irete Kana, where he became king in Dahomey as well. Various 𝗀𝗲s that speak of him that are children of Irete Meji. But the interesting thing about Irete Meji was actually where Babalawo was a doctor, where he was a medical professional. And I remember at the Ifa that we directed, the gentleman was a doctor. So it was definitely a 𝗃𝗍𝗃 that I used during Ita and really had an effect on him because it kind of, touched on various aspects of what his career and education process had been. But in this sign, it speaks of, once again, Babalawo, and he was a doctor, and he had a case where the king's wife couldn't give birth. So he was kind of, focusing on his own training and not really getting second opinions because he wanted to look good in front of the king. So he was using a bunch of different methods that he knew that had proven, tried and true before that weren't giving the results that he was looking for now. So he had a sister, and in this case it was Nanu, right? Because when we talk about Irete Meji, it also speaks of the family of Babalawo. And you can even see aspects of that in the 𝗀𝗲 of Irete File, another one of the Iretes, where 𝘃𝗶𝗱𝗁 or 𝘃𝗶𝗱𝗁 Loli was born, as it is in the book. I have it as 𝘃𝗶𝗱𝗁, ultimately. But he had a sister named Nanu, who was a nurse, right? And she was working with him, he was working with her. But Nanu was realizing that this specific situation was a little bit out of their scope because it might have been a little more spiritually influenced. And she didn't really feel that the queen was missing anything, maybe moral support, maybe other methods that were going to facilitate birth rather than trying to be more allopathic than holistic. So she went to her brother and said, we might want to try something a little less conventional here. And Babalawo really wasn't trying to hear it because, once again, it was the king. He was trying to keep up appearances and his salary. So Nanu, seeing that, they weren't going to get a result with the way they were going and her brother was being stubborn, started looking into other options. Now, in a parallel timeline, there was a woman named Oshun, right, who, had a lot of spiritual talents and wanted to exercise them in a way where she would be recognized for them. And one of them had to do with childbirth. So she went for divination. The 𝗀𝗲 of Babayi Deji was revealed, where Ifa said she needed to perform sacrifice. And when she did, she actually left it in a place where she ran into Nanu, right, Babalawo's sister. And they started conversing and things like that, talking about, life and whatnot. And Oshun said, hey, I specialize in childbirth. This is actually the Ifa of the doula, which is the position that helps facilitate childbirth outside of, conventional medicine per se. But, you have doulas that are nurses, etc. But that position was actually born here. And the first person to occupy it was Oshun. And Oshun, hearing Nanu's case, said, I think I can help you resolve that. The only thing is we kind of have to be careful with your brother because, if he sees me just working on his patient without his approval, he's known to have a temper. And she said, I'll facilitate things in a way where he won't be there, neither will the king, and you could just focus on the queen, because if she doesn't give birth soon, there's going to be complications and we're going to have a tragedy rather than a celebration. So when Nanu snuck Oshun in, Oshun, there's various versions of the story as to what she did, whether she used honey, whether she used a pumpkin to clean the stomach, whatever stimulants she needed to be able to basically bring the queen into a safe labor. And she was successful, and she actually birthed the baby. Now, at that moment, Babalawo came in, and he was like, what's the meaning of this? And Nanu was like, just go along with it. And then after that, the king came in, and the king was like, oh, Babalawo, you did it. And he was like, yeah, me and my team, right? And, he gave credit to Nanu and Oshun as well. And, they all started interacting, and Babalawo started getting to know Oshun and learned a lot from her, to the point where, some say that he became enamored, and they actually began a relationship together, which has happened in various Odus before. And basically their specialty was, this is the Odu of basically the OBGYN, facilitating childbirth, obstetrics, gynecology, all of the things that go into childbirth, which actually isn't that simple of a process as we like to think modernly. So when you look at this Odu and you look at somebody with this sign, they may be in the medical field, like the gentleman that was at the Ifa that we were coordinating, or in general. But it's one that has to do with ultimately the preservation of life. Because when you look at the first story of where he evaded death and basically made fun of her and escaped her, or in this pataki where, basically this medical team, but ultimately Oshun was able to facilitate, the prince or princess's birth, it was a blessing all the way around. So when this Odu comes out, it's definitely making references to health needing to be a priority, whether it's the salvation of it or the preservation of it. Because you might be doing just fine, but it wants to avoid negative situations, or you might be somewhere critical and it's trying to provide solutions. I actually know somebody with this Odu, but they had it in one of their deities. And, when the Odu came out, I was actually there for Ita. And, I told them, unfortunately, this Odu says, hey, when it's revealed, the person can perish within a multiple of 16, 16 hours, 16 days, 16 weeks, etc. It speaks of that. Some people have it as the number 7, neither here nor there. It's an Odu where death is near, unfortunately. And I remember they performed their abode pretty immediately. I think they did it that day. And I'll never forget, I was actually alerted because they had done the rest of the recommendations, and right after that, they had actually had a head-on collision.
Oh.
And luckily they survived, and they were fine. But the ironic part about it is Irete Meji says you came face-to-face with death and was able to laugh in its face and escape. Now, mind you, obviously they weren't laughing during the accident. It was pretty traumatic. But they ended up coming out scotch-free physically. So it's a very powerful Odu that has to be taken seriously. I've actually heard of cases as well where this Odu is revealed and, Babalawo is actually passing away within that time frame afterwards. So it's just one that, not that it needs to be feared, but it is one that needs to be taken seriously, and the recommendations have to be done expeditiously so that, we don't suffer any of these consequences, because it does speak about some very real topics, right?
That's wild.
Yeah, and it's happened multiple times. Like, I've interacted with this Odu multiple times. Luckily, I've never, well, I won't say luckily or unluckily. An Odu's great, and it is a beautiful sign. But I've never had to, go through the process of having to appease it, especially based on anything negative. So,
is there anything you can do to, obviously you have to do the work that it's telling you to do.
Yeah, you perform
like,
𝗏𝗏. You perform 𝗏𝗏. Irete Meji is actually seen as the force of 𝗏𝗏. So when you look in Isese or you look in Lukumi, Irete Meji is present in both 𝗏𝗏s. And it's not because it's just a Meji. Because there's other Meis, at least in the 𝗏𝗏 that are omitted. Like, you'll have brothers that perform 𝗏𝗏 or 𝗏𝗏. They'll do the first 4 cardinal Meis, 𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏, 𝗃𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏, and they'll cut it there. But even with that, Irete Meji, 99% of the time still gets incorporated because it's seen as the force of the 𝗏𝗏. It's the strength of the 𝗏𝗏. This is the Odu of tectonic plate movement, magma, volcanic explosions. The Orisha Gayu here is pretty heavily, as well as Olokun. It's a very intense and a very fierce and a very ferocious Odu with a lot of power. With great power comes great responsibility. And as we go through the patakis that are associated with the sign, it's pretty easy to see as to why and how. So, kind of going away from the medical, life and death thing, Irete Meji is seen as an Odu of utter prosperity. It has various verses for the Orisha 𝗀𝗃, but apart from that, it's also the Odu of the money tree. So for anybody that has a money tree, that concept was born here. Because in this sign, Olodumare had a garden, and within the garden, there was a tree that money grew from. Whether it was dollar bills or cowrie shells, I don't know, whatever you can visually digest. But he actually was going to have a competition to see who the wisest of the Orishas was. Whoever could make it to the top of the tree and pluck off $1 or a cowrie was going to be the richest person in history. So Orunmila was pretty broke here. You know, economically, he wasn't doing very well. He was married to Oshun. But he didn't have a lot of movement from a clientele base or a business standpoint. So he was getting a lot of heat from his lady. She's like, you know, I love you. You got to make money. You know, I want things. We need things. I need you to hustle. So Orula was getting a little stressed out because, you know, no one wants to hear that. So he performed divination. And with the Odu of Irete Meji, or Ate Meji as it's known, he was told to perform sacrifice to Eshu, right, with various ingredients and materials. Amongst them, a rooster to Eshu. There was a ladder with a certain number of steps. I think it was a multiple of 7. Various food items, right, like corn, akara, things like that. And he provided it all to Eshu. And Eshu said, I'm going to help you get to the top of the tree. Now, the other Orishas had failed because Olodumare had put guardians around the tree. And there's so many versions of this story. I mean, in the encyclopedias, there's like 5 or 6. But some of the animals, like when one version it was an anaconda, in another there was a horse, there was a ram, there was a rooster, I think there was a dog. Let's just say it was all of them, right? So with the materials that Orunmila had provided to Eshu, as Orunmila was going towards the tree, the animals, right, wanted to alert Olodumare that there was an intruder. But right when they were about to do that, Eshu would shove the pertinent food item into their mouth to keep them quiet, and they fell asleep after eating. So let's say to the snake, he threw a piece of beef. To the horse, he gave him some oats. To the dog, he gave him a bone. To the rooster, he gave him some corn, blah, blah, blah. And then Orunmila made his way to the tree, and with the same ladder he had performed 𝗏𝗏 with, he climbed to the top of it and plucked off what he needed to, and Eshu screamed at the top of his lungs that Orunmila had won the competition. So when Olodumare looked down and saw Orunmila at the top of the tree and all the other Orishas were green with envy, he said, you will be the most prosperous Orisha. Anybody that wants to find prosperity has to go through Orunmila. And Orunmila said, well, to get to me, you have to go through Eshu. So that's where that sequence within our spirituality is born. That's why for anybody that's looking for economic alignment, because there's nothing wrong with wanting to be financially stable via spirituality. It's one of the most important aspects of our life. Love, money, health, etc. And Irete Meji is why without Orunmila, no one can ever be truly prosperous. Now, mind you, there's a bunch of billionaires that don't have Mano Orula, presumably. Right. But there's a big difference between making a lot of money and being successful. You know, you have a lot of wealthy people that aren't successful. You have a lot of successful people that don't have a lot of money. So Irete Meji speaks of all those concepts. Now, mind you, once Orunmila became basically the distributor of money throughout heaven, he went back home and he brought a big sack to his wife, and she's like, oh my God, I love you, right? So, you know, he was able to save his marriage and, you know, begin his Ifa practice, advertise all of these different things, and do very well for himself. So this is literally the 𝗏𝗏, or the sign of the 𝗏𝗏 of prosperity, right, or the money tree, you know. So I have heard that the one that is mentioned, and I don't know the scientific name, I think it's called the Buddha plant, you know, not to, you know, be misunderstood, but I remember one brother had told me that, and he actually showed it to me when I was in Miami, and I was like, man, it's an interesting looking tree. Like some of the branches were like bulbous and things like that, so I don't know. But then you have the regular money tree that people have at their front, like you go to certain restaurants and things like that, you'll see it. Yeah. But, you know, ultimately, the most important thing there is for anybody that has this Odu, getting that 𝗏𝗏 done, because that 𝗏𝗏 is life-changing. I've done it once or twice for a couple people, and, you know, it has a very, very, very intense effects. Like, it literally changes people's situations. So someone with Irete Meji ideally should be prosperous, you know, as long as they're spiritually aligned.
Interesting.
So yeah. So another thing that's in Irete Meji that you know, as far as from a topic standpoint, can be a little difficult to speak about is actually cannibalism and human sacrifice.
Whoa.
Right? It's actually why it's taboo. In this Odu, it speaks of Orunmila, and Orunmila was a hunter here, and he was very successful. He was somebody that, you know, he never went to the jungle without returning without a deer. So the other hunters were jealous of that. So what they ended up doing was setting a trap for him by opening a hole and covering it, you know, with foliage so that he would fall in it. And one day he actually caught a deer and was walking his normal path, and he did fall in the hole. And unfortunately, he broke his legs. That's why in this Odu, Babalawo is so big, or, you know, even when we're praying Irete Meji, or we're doing the suyere of Arikum Haniwa, Arikum Haniwa, Arikum Haniwa, Arikum Haniwa, Onikiwa Kuwa Dideo, Arikum Haniwa, which is basically saying we need health to arrive, because in this sign it speaks heavily of the legs, specifically the knees, because in this sign Orunmila basically broke his leg at the joints. And that's why when Irete Meji is prayed, you know, we tap the legs, you know, as a way to kind of dispel that negative energy that his enemies had placed on him. But lo and behold, Orula's in a hole, right? So his enemies looked at him, they laughed at him, they said, I hope you enjoy the raw deer because you're going to die in there. And, you know, various people walked by the hole. This is the Odu of the Good Samaritan, by the way, where some people acted righteous, but when people actually needed them, they didn't do anything. Because the people would come by the hole and see Orula in it, and he'd plead for help, and no one would help him. So he began to realize how much people were envious of him and really disliked him for things outside of his control other than not being more discreet. So there's various versions, but there's the most common one is that 3 women walked by. The Pataki says one was Oshanla, or the female version of 𝗿𝗶𝗸𝗏. Another was 𝘃𝗶𝗏𝗏, and another was Oshun, right? And when they heard or saw Orunmila in there, they decided they were going to help him because, you know, he was singing a song and trying to get people's attention. This is an Odu that speaks a lot about music as well, the arts, etc. So each of them actually used their clothing to be able to pull him out. So Chanla had a white robe or tunic, 𝘃𝗶𝗏𝗏 had a blue one, and then the last one to get tied to it was Ochung's, which was yellow. But the ironic part about it was Ochung was actually menstruating at the moment. And, you know, there's a point to this point as well. And when they let down the cloth, Orunmila had to grab onto the part that actually had, you know, menses. So he was resistant to this at first, but, you know, deep down inside, he just wanted to get out of the hole. So they pulled him out, right? And that's why till this day, women who want to attend to Ifa don't have to wait for their menses to be gone to do so. Orunmila is the only Orisha that is not, you know, offended by menses. The other ones are not compatible due to the 𝗃𝗏𝗄𝗃 Shoronga, which is what these 3 women represented at the moment. But he does not mind. So for all the women that are going through that moment, just know that you can still take care of Ifa. Not the warriors or anybody else, but Orunmila, yes. And that's in Irete Meji. The Pataki is there. So when they pulled him out, he thanked them profusely. They took him back to their hut. They took care of him. And, you know, as they nursed him back to health, he asked them, he said, how can I repay you, ladies? And they said, well, to be frank with you, we all are barren. We all want children, you know? So he said, I'll give you all a child, right? As humbly as he could.
All right.
And he impregnated all of them, right? But the one that, you know, actually, you know, stuck around the most was Ochung, as far as getting to know him and things like that. Well, they say that Ochanla and 𝘃𝗏𝗏𝗏 kind of went about their way. They really weren't expecting Orunmila to be a present father. But even with that, Ochung and Orula parted ways, and Orula was able to reestablish himself. And now, based on what had happened during his hunting escapades, he wanted to focus more on his Ifa practice. So he ended up going to the land of Ife, right? Now, in the land of Ife, there was a king named Odudua. Some say in the manifestation of a path known as Alabuweye, which means he who bathes himself in blood. And he had this ritual where on an annual basis he would have a virgin sacrificed to him.
Oh man.
So it's kind of like the Hunger Games. No one really cared because they were like, it's not my daughter. You know, it's horrible. But this happened many years afterwards, and they actually kidnapped a young lady that was in the jail cell ready to be sacrificed, and she started singing a song. And ironically, the song mentioned Orunmila. And when the guards heard it, they knew Orunmila was the Oluo of Ife, or the head Ifa priest, and they went running to him and said, hey, the sacrifice this year is mentioning you, saying you're her father, and that she was the product of an encounter between you and Oshun. You know, could you go clarify and see what's going on? So when they went over there, Orunmila started interrogating the girl and said, you know, what's your name? And she said, my name is 𝗃𝗏𝗏𝗏, right? Which is ironically my wife's name in Orisha, and is actually a deity till this day in Nigeria. So when he started interrogating, she sang the same song that he had sung in the hole to get her mother Ochung's attention. And he realized this must have been the child that he, you know, conceived with Ochung that he hadn't seen in 13 years. Wow. But now he had a dilemma because his daughter was about to be sacrificed. So what they did is at the moment of sacrifice, they covered what was supposed to be the person, when in reality it was a goat, right? A she-goat. And when they sacrificed the goat, 𝗃𝗏𝗏𝗏 enjoyed it so much to the point where he said, let me see what I've just eaten. And when he looked, it was a goat. He said, where's the human? And Orula looked at him and said, I apologize, but you know, you were going to eat my daughter, and I couldn't really have that happen. Yeah. So we switched something out. And he said, to be honest with you, this tastes much better than anything human. So I'd rather continue with this. And then all of the other Orishas presented themselves, and each of them selected their preferred animals. So for example, 𝗃𝗏𝗏𝗏 chose the she-goat, 𝗃𝗏𝗏𝗏 chose the she-goat and the hen, Orunmila chose the she-goat and the hen, Ochung the she-goat and the hen, Shango the ram and the rooster, Ogun the goat or the dog and the rooster, 𝗃𝗏𝗏𝗏 the goat and the roosters, 𝘃𝗶𝗂𝗎 the goat and the quails. Like each of them chose their predilect animals. Until this day, in Irete Meji, you know, 𝗃𝗏𝗏𝗏 put the determination that anything such as this would be taboo, whether it be cannibalism or whether it be human sacrifice. It's really ironic because in my sign, there's a similar story, but it was about a baby that had a birthmark, right? And ironically, I was born with a mark. So it's also another 𝗃𝗏𝗏 that speaks of why cannibalism or human sacrifice is taboo. So, and that kind of spanned across Africa. Because when we look in Irete Meji, it speaks about, honestly, the gruesome past of our people, where we did have those habits, as many did in Africa, right? They say that whether it was 𝗃𝗏𝗏𝗏 or specifically the Orisha Olokun, that, you know, a slave was sacrificed to the ocean on a daily basis. After 𝗃𝗏𝗏𝗏 put this determination, Olokun said, okay, you don't have to sacrifice somebody to me every day at the ocean, but every now and again, I'm going to go ahead and retro-pay myself and do a tsunami and, you know, kill thousands of people to catch up.
Oh, man.
So that's why every now and again you have a natural disaster where, you know, a bunch of people perish, you know. So that's, all of that was born in Irete Meji. So
it seems like this covers a lot of death in this one.
Yeah, Irete Meji is an 𝗃𝗏𝗏𝗏 that speaks a lot about spirituality, whether it's mediumship or whether it's us ultimately transitioning one day. But, you know, this 𝗃𝗏𝗏𝗏, what it tried to do was regulate death more than anything. Because if you notice, it was happening in a way where, you know, it was unregulated. You know, people were perishing, people were dying, death was running rampant, you know, innocent children were dying, all these different things. And, you know, within the same 𝗃𝗏𝗏𝗏, it ultimately became taboo as well. So you're going to see, especially with the Meis or 𝗃𝗏𝗏𝗏 Ifa in general, the problem is usually mitigated by the solution within the same sign. You know, there's always that change or that elevation or lesson that happens there where 𝗃𝗏𝗏𝗏 realized, yeah, I was wrong, or Orula realized, yeah, we were wrong, because until somebody we knew and loved was about to get hurt, we weren't really paying attention, you know. So Irete Meji is really the 𝗃𝗏𝗏𝗏 of do unto others as you want done unto yourself, you know, the golden rule. So, you know, and another thing that was born here that I think that's really key as well, because I'm not sure if this is coming out before or after the Ifan animals, And I'll probably reiterate the theme there as well, but it was actually born in Irete Meji. And this 𝗏𝗏 is why the Orishas prefer virgin animals, right? So what it means is they prefer young, fresh animals because those are the ones that actually provide the energy that they're looking for, especially during initiatory processes where they're being born, right? So, for example, for the longest time, at least in Cuba, I'm not sure, how it is in Africa still, but like when we were going to sacrifice a dog to Ogun, it should be a male that, was fresh out, or, the youngest, smallest animals because they provide the freshest sacrifice. So that's actually born in Irete Meji, other than for deities such as 𝗏𝗶𝗸𝗁, depending on the path, because, the goat that's given to San Lázaro, usually very old, long beard, long horns, and might have a slight imperfection. But for everybody else, practically, that's actually the best way to go. Where you see some people who are like, no, give me the biggest, goat. Give me the biggest, oldest, thing, thinking it's going to provide the most blood or the most energy when it's actually the complete opposite. I mean, when you look at the 𝗏𝗏 of 𝗏𝗶𝗸𝗏, which is one of the children of Irete as well, just on the other leg, it says that when we offer a goat to Eshu, if we offer a big black goat that's fully mature and whatnot, it's because we're going to war and we're trying to destroy somebody. So that's why I'm really excited about the Ifa Animals episode, because we're going to go into all these different concepts, why certain Orishas like certain animals and why we sacrifice one versus the other, or why we sacrifice it all, kind of going over that theology as well. So,
oh yeah, that should be good.
Yeah, it'd be interesting stuff. This 𝗏𝗏 speaks a lot about, obviously, Orunmila, but a lot about the Orisha Oshun as well. In this 𝗏𝗏, it speaks of Oshun. And Oshun had gone through horrible divorces with, the various relationships that she had had. And Orunmila had always been interested in her, but she had never really paid any attention to him, because she was more into like the toxic personality, Shango style, forgive me. And, he realized one day that she was single again, and he ran into her by the river. And, they started conversing. And he said, "How are you?" And she said, "Well, I'm doing horrible. I had a horrible divorce. I thought I was going to spend the rest of my life with this man." She had been with Shango. And it couldn't have been anything but the opposite. I mean, we never had children together. I'm older than I would have liked to have been at this point without having a family. I'm not doing well, Orula. And he said, "Well, you look beautiful, And she said, "How can you find me beautiful depressed by the riverside?" And he told her, he said, "I always thought you were beautiful, but everybody has to walk their path, How about me and you get together?"
Hey.
Orula was a sly dog.
Hey.
And, she was in complete disbelief. She's like, I never paid attention to you. I never really was interested in Ifa. And here you are trying to, get my attention. So she said, what do I have to lose? And they started courting. And, they quickly realized that they were perfect complements for each other. And, one thing led to another. And before you know this, they started practicing procreation. And Oshun was an older woman, so it was seemingly unlikely that she was going to become pregnant. But through 𝗏𝗏 and through the miraculous power of Ifa medicine, before you know it, she was with child, right? And she gave birth to a daughter, and that daughter was 𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏, right? This is, now mind you, remember that Ifa is multiple dimensions, parallel universes, timelines, and all these other things, where we can go through a similar story within the same sign in different lifetimes. So, they ultimately found happiness together. And, they stayed together forever. And 𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏, reaped all the benefits of having a Babalawo father and an Olorisha mother, and grew into a personality herself. But this 𝗏𝗏 says that, or it gives the possibility as to why Ifa recognizes that women are able to give birth up until the age of 50, ideally. Now, mind you, there are cases, where women after 50 have given birth, which is legitimate because it's happened. But Ifa says ideally it should happen before the age of 50. So they say that in this 𝗏𝗏, And this 𝗲𝗲𝗃𝗍, Oshun was between the age of 40 and 50 when she actually gave birth to Poroye, and Orunmila was actually a little bit younger than her, right? And they were a perfect complement for each other based on their maturity levels, desires, and life experiences.
That sounds familiar.
Yeah, right? And but the thing is, this Odu says that if you're not trying to have a baby, use all measures to not have the baby. Because Irete Meji is one of those ones where the kid kind of sneaks in there. So if you saw yourself with Irete Meji or you have it in initiation, you have to be careful with becoming pregnant at an advanced age if that's not the goal. Now, mind you, it could also speak of ectopic pregnancy, which could be deadly, or fatal. So make sure we're paying attention to that, or any of the complications that comes with childbirth. Now, the interesting thing about this 𝗲𝗲𝗃𝗍 is how much it resembles the one where Oshun helped the queen give birth as the doula. So a couple of the common themes here, like you mentioned, Phil, health, death, spirituality, mediumship, but then from another standpoint, love, childbirth, rearing, all of these different things. So it really speaks about the circle of life all the way around, where Irete Meji is there when we're born and he's there when we transition, based on the characteristics within the sign,
Yeah.
So, kind of continue. Oh, go ahead.
Is Eshu mentioned in this one? Because Eshu is kind of a facilitator when people cross over.
Yeah, he is. He's there definitely. But he was there when Orunmila climbed the tree of prosperity. But there's also another 𝗲𝗲𝗃𝗍 here. It's funny you mentioned Eshu as well, because Babayi Deji is actually recognized as the first Odu where Eshu ate goat, or 𝗿𝗶𝗸𝗲𝗁. There's a verse here that speaks of when Orunmila, via Eshu's help, was able to identify the goat, who was supposed to be Orunmila's best friend, as a traitor, right? The goat throughout Ifa, to be honest with you, and that's why I'm really looking forward to the animals, because people kind of look at a goat and they're like, man, it's like it's looking at me. It's like it knows.
Got shiesty eyes.
It's got the 𝗃𝗍𝗃𝗍, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
With the 𝗃𝗍𝗃 mask, Yeah. But you kind of look at him, you're like, man, you're a trickster, you know what I'm saying? You're tricky. And Irete Meji speaks of all those things, And what happened is Orunmila gave a secret, or Eshu told Orunmila to put the goat to the test, because Orunmila's prosperity, based on a divination he had with Irete Meji, was him giving a goat to Eshu. And he told Eshu, he said, I'll give you whatever you want, but please don't make me sacrifice my friend. And Eshu said, if you think he's your friend, give him this piece of information to hold and see if if he's sturdy. So when Orunmila revealed something that wasn't true to the goat, somehow everybody else found out about it. So they were able to identify that the goat was the traitor. So when Orunmila told Eshu, Eshu said, no problem, we'll kidnap him. So they ran down on him and they yoked him up and they sacrificed him. And that solidified the relationship and friendship between Eshu and Orunmila, because Orunmila realized that he could trust no one more than he can trust 𝗃𝗏𝗏. The interesting thing about Eshu is, everyone likes to look at him as like this childlike, mischievous energy, when in reality, Eshu is the most honest and loyal energy in our whole spirituality. He is incapable of lying, being that he is the balance. He is justice, ultimately, recompense and karma. So, and it's one of the few Odus where it shows Eshu in this very noble light, where, his trickery and his mischief is really to make the truth be revealed so that the proper people are brought to justice and receive the punishment they deserve, which in this case was the goat. So Eshu here, very big. And he's also the one that eats the rooster during the ebo of prosperity. So for anybody that is Irete Meji, who makes you prosperous, is Eshu. Now mind you, there's very important deities here like Orisha J, Orunmila, Eshu, but Eshu's huge, and Oshun, I meant to say, but Eshu here is absolutely huge. There's actually another story here that I think is key as well, because it's a learning moment. In this Odu is where Ogun and Oya were married. And Oya was a very progressive woman. She was very independent. She had learned how to be very complete from her father. Like, she knew how to kill an animal. She knew how to shoot a gun. She knew martial arts, and apart from that, she was a woman's woman. She knew how to be a lady. So she was really complete. But she married Ogun, right? Who was a man's man as well, very alpha. And, you know, they would bump heads because Ogun would try to dominate Oya, and Oya was like, not even my father could do that. You know what I'm saying? So you're barking up the wrong tree. It's better for you to find balance with me rather than trying to dominate me. So she was trying to get him to be a little more of a Sigma. So neither here nor there, Ogun, realizing he couldn't control his wife the way he wanted to, toxically, he resorted to witchcraft. And they say that, you know, there was a specific branch or tree or leaf that he put in his mouth to dominate Oya. And he was able to, but he did it in a very toxic way. He actually chained her up and put her on display in the middle of the town square as a way of, you know, showing everybody what could happen if they were disobedient.
What?
So yeah, it was real ugly. So Eshu saw this and went running to Shango, who was actually in the company of his personal bodyguard, 𝗀𝗲𝗍, right? So when Eshu went running back to Shango, Shango said, we have to speak to Orula to see how we can resolve this because we can't leave her there like that. You know, it's inhumane. So when Orunmila revealed Irete Meji, a sacrifice was revealed. You know, and basically Shango showed up along with 𝗀𝗲𝗍 and Eshu, and they all started beating up on Ogun to free Oya. Obviously, they were successful. They released the chains and things like that. They say when Shango punched Ogun in the face, the tree or the branch that was in his mouth flew out, so it revealed that he was doing witchcraft to her, Ogun. And, you know, Ogun basically had to abdicate his throne in shame due to his toxicity.
Wow.
And after that, you know, even though there wasn't a formal divorce, Oya was so appreciative of Shango, she decided to start a relationship with him. And even though they would, you know, bump heads the same, Shango recognized how much talent Oya had and would allow her to express herself. Now, this really benefited Shango because, you know, when Shango would have war, there's a famous story, I don't think it's in Irete Meji, but it's throughout the corpus, where Shango was sick and he couldn't go to war. And Oya actually grew a beard and went to war for him. So all of that, I would imagine, is a result of this story where it's one of the occurrences where they actually got together and started a relationship. But Oya was a woman's woman, and that was in this 𝗀𝗲𝗍. So in this 𝗀𝗲𝗍, it speaks of why, as partners, we're not supposed to control each other. We're supposed to coexist. We're supposed to accentuate each other's virtues and try to heal each other's weaknesses, you know, and help us grow from them and through them. But controlling, you know, that doesn't work because ultimately it turned into a domestic situation. You know, people don't ultimately change, but if someone isn't exactly the way you want them when you get with them, you know, other than some minor things, you know, sometimes it's better not to start a relationship at all. Or sometimes it's also good to recognize when, hey, this person's 98% where I need them to be, the other 2% will work on over a lifetime, and you might have something special. But Ogun didn't see that or realize that, and because of it, Oya suffered until Shango was able to free her. Now, there's another interesting dynamic here because due to 𝗀𝗲𝗍 being one of the people that actually freed Oya, Oya actually, in this 𝗀𝗲𝗍, is why she's synonymous with the buffalo. It's why she blessed the buffalo, because the 𝗀𝗲𝗍 or the Orisha 𝗀𝗲𝗍 is manifested physically through 2 buffalo horns. So it became one of her power items. So it's actually one of the deities technically that Oya and Shango share to a certain degree, where there's versions or there's documentation that said originally 𝗀𝗲𝗍 belonged to Oya and then she gave it to Shango as an act of gratitude, or vice versa. You know, timelines get lost in context. But it's why she's associated with the buffalo. There's other 𝗀𝗲𝗍s like 𝗀𝗏𝗏 as well as Irete Meji, which is also a child of Oya. I mean, a child of Irete Meji as well. So that concept is reiterated there. But ultimately, for the most part, Shango and Oya had a happily ever after here, you know, when they weren't arguing. But they loved each other very much. So definitely a Mori episode.
Okay.
Yeah. How much time we at?
We're like at 45 minutes. So
Yeah, let me see.
you got one more, and then we can wrap it up.
Irete Meji. Oh, yeah. I got one more, and we'll bring it full circle.
All right.
In this 𝗀𝗲𝗍, because a lot of people, we did a live recently, and a lot of people were asking about the Orisha Oro, or Orun, right? There's not a lot of information.
Spell it?
O-R-O.
O-R-O. Okay.
O-R-O. Yeah, Oru. It sound well. The thing is in Nigeria it's Oro, which means noise or sound. But due to Cuban, vernacular and the way we speak, it became Orum in Cuba or in the Lukumi practice. But his real name is Oro or Orolewé. And in this sign, Oro was an orphan. And the reason I'm throwing this one out there is because there's not a lot of information on Oro for people who aren't initiated in Oro, being that it's such a selective group. But, we could talk about some things. Oro was an orphan, right? And he wanted to know where he came from or who he was, because he kind of always felt like divinely selected, or there was providence about him. And he went to visit the Babalawo. And when he did, the Odu Babayi Irete Meji or 𝗿𝗶𝗸𝗁 Meji was revealed, where Ifa said he needed to perform sacrifice and keep walking until he couldn't walk anymore. And, when he did that, he actually arrived at a palace. And he walked in. And, the king was kind of appalled, because he kind of looked at, basically this figure, who was very intimidating. And he said, "How can we help you?" And he said, "Well, my name is Oro. And, I'm looking for my father. I'm an orphan. I don't know where I come from. I was instructed by the Babalawo of my village to perform sacrifice to said Odu and take it till I couldn't walk no more. And to be frank with you, it was in front of your palace, Your Highness. I haven't bathed. I've been walking. I haven't eaten." And the king kind of looked at him and felt bad for him and gave him all of the accommodations as was hospitable. And he started a conversation with him. And he asked him about, where he was from and what he remembered and all these different things. And, as Oro was telling the king the story, the king actually started crying.
Oh, wow.
And Oro was like, have I disrespected you? Have I offended you? He said, "No, I think you're my son." And the king was Oduduwa.
What?
And what had happened was Oduwa and Oro's mother had divorced. Right? And unfortunately, Oro's mother had passed away at a very young age, so he had no way of knowing who his father was. And through this divine occurrence, they reconnected, right? So there was a lot of emotion and things like that. And Oduduwa proposed to his son, "Why don't me and you go around the world together and catch up on all this lost time?" And Oro was like, "I'd love that." And they actually did. Now, ironically, Irete Meji and my Odu of 𝗃𝗏𝗁 have very strong links, because one of the chapters of that great escapade that they did is actually in my Odu, where they arrived in what I believe to be the land of the Senalu, which had some connotations with Ethiopia. And when they arrived, Odua had taught Oro all of the dead languages of Africa, that were ancient, that weren't being used anymore. So when they arrived in that land, they were able to communicate appropriately with the residents. And the residents were pretty appalled, because, anybody outside really didn't know how to communicate with them. So when they found out who Odua and Oro was, they actually made them the kings of that land to help them get reorganized and modernized to a certain degree. So that was one of the accomplishments of Odua and Oro from Irete Meji that translated to 𝗃𝗏𝗁. So it was a pretty epic tale, man. But it's really nice. I mean, this Odu speaks a lot about reconnection, family, the construction of a home, the importance of having a nucleus, and the importance of being in our children and our parents' lives, and all the benefits that comes from it, especially having the satisfaction of knowing where we come from, because that's one of the biggest questions that we're trying to answer here, as modern human beings. So, lovely story.
Yeah, man. Great story.
What do you think, brother?
I love it, man.
I like Irete Meji a lot. It's my mother Odu, and I met a lot of really talented people with it, a lot of very nice people that we've interacted with online with the Odu, and it's definitely in the top tier as far as strength and knowledge, and just somebody that is going to be able to accomplish quite a bit.
I hear you. Well, guess what time it is?
Oh, my favorite time.
Yes, right. Time to show some love to people who show love to you, man.
Yeah.
All right, guys. If you're wondering what that music is, that is our awesome elevator music to show love to the channel members. And if you want to become a channel member, right under this video, there's a little button that says join our membership program.
Very nice.
That gives you access to many, many different things, whether it's extra shows, early releases, just private shows just for you, discounts on merch, you name it. So we're going to show some love to the newest members.
Nice.
All right, here we go. Let me hit the button again. All right, so we got Shohana.
Thank you.
They are a supporter. They just joined today.
Welcome.
We got Anthony Jordan, who is a supporter. He joined yesterday.
Awesome.
We got Lisa, VIP.
Okay.
Been here for 3 days.
Straight to the top.
Yeah, we got Rushia, a supporter for 8 days.
Welcome. Thank you.
We got Steven Julian, a supporter for 10 days.
Nice.
Maddie J, a premium superfan for 2 weeks. And rounding it out is Filthy Rich for Life, a supporter for 2 weeks.
Well, that's a great name for sure. Guys, couple closing thoughts before we go ahead and disconnect. 𝗏𝗲𝗏𝐻𝑎𝑛𝑑𝑠andmore.com is up and running for all your service and product needs. We do ship. Be sure to check out the classes as well and all the benefits that come with the membership program. If you can't watch us, be sure to listen to us on all the major platforms for the audio cast, iHeartRadio, Apple, Spotify, etc. Thank you so much from all of us here. Be sure to subscribe, and until next time, see the light.
Bye.
Baba Joseph showed the path today. Baba knows the way, we follow the signs. He walks with the Orisha through sacred lines. He speaks with the ancients, he honors the drum. He carries the wisdom where we all come from.